Okay, everybody, welcome back to Raising the Flipping Bar. I have Dan Fortune in the house. Dan, welcome.
Thanks. It's fun to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Dan, you're with the Impact team. Give us a little bit of a background. Before we jump into real estate, what I would love to hear, and I think the audience would as well, tell me a little bit about what you were doing before real estate, because it's interesting and it's different.
Okay. Yeah, I was flying satellites for the Air Force and doing some secret squirrel stuff and doing some engineering stuff for Lockheed Martin.
So that stuff, it's like super top secret. You probably can't talk about that.
Some of it, yeah.
That's interesting.
For sure. Yeah, it was definitely top secret.
Did you go to the academy?
I did. Yep.
Okay.
Down the street in Colorado Springs.
Nice. Nice.
And then the Air Force shipped me around for a little while, and then I got out due to some family medical stuff.
Like, favorite part of the world, or like where were you stationed that you thought was most interesting, I guess?
So I had an incredible experience with the Air Force. Like, they treated me amazingly. I worked with great people, staff, all that stuff. There was nothing negative really about my Air Force experience. Yeah. I worked at the academy for a year after I graduated in the athletic department, which was really fun. That was during 9/11. Wow. So I got to sit a lot in like a back area, staring at a door, making sure nobody came in. So a lot of hours doing that after 9/11, just making sure the place was secure. It was such an interesting time. And then the Air Force shipped me around. I would say probably the most exciting place was over in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, I was doing some stuff in Australia that was pretty amazing.
Awesome. So, and you studied engineering at the academy?
I did, engineering and economics.
Okay.
So
that's an interesting kind of parallel of those two things together. Yeah. Was that just of interest, or what?
Yeah, I mean, they allow you, I mean, they've got a huge spectrum of degrees. And so those were very interesting to me both.
Yeah. So. Well, the cool thing about that is I want our audience to really pick up on that. People can do anything before real estate. And, and not everybody has to have this degree in real estate or this degree in business. Yeah. Like, of the season 2 guests that we've had on, everybody's had a super different background.
Well, what I tell, I'm doing something that I didn't even need to graduate from high school.
Yeah.
I mean,
true.
I have an MBA, so I have a master's degree. All those things, being at the academy and master's degree, I think they're helpful. But really for me, the best part of it was my mentor. Like, without him, I would not, even with all the stuff that I've done, like I tell people, like, I did pretty well in my first year and did really well in my second year. But if I didn't have a mentor, that probably would have been like 3 or 4 years. And even then I'd probably still be making dumb mistakes that were unnecessary, that he just taught me how not to. And to be honest, what I tell people is, like, they're like, well, why did you choose real estate? I said, because that's what my mentor did. If he was a plumber, I would be a plumber.
Yeah.
I just wanted to model my life after him. He is an amazing man. I was like, I just want to do what you do. Please teach me.
Yeah, that's interesting. And actually, we'll maybe pull in this thread a little bit. In one of our prior episodes with Chris Lopez, we talked about how to approach mentors and how to gain people's trust and respect. Was there something that you did that helped you align with that person, or like, how did that all come down the pipeline?
Absolutely. 100% aligned with him. I married his daughter.
Oh, okay. That's pretty easy, whether he liked it or not. That's
right.
Pretty easy.
He had a vested interest, but what you're saying is 100% correct. And I've chatted with a lot of people, like, figure out how you're going to provide value to the mentor, whatever that is. I would say, look at them and make sure that they've succeeded in ways that you want to succeed. Right. And then how can you provide a value to them? What would that look like? And like, one of the ways I think you provide value to them is do a lot of research before. We were talking about that with your hiring process.
Yeah.
Like, someone that does a lot of work beforehand, so they come in and are not wasting time asking questions that if they'd done some research beforehand, they wouldn't be wasting your time. Because that's it. Somebody that's worth mentoring you, their time is probably pretty valuable. Yeah. And they've got a lot of people looking for it, asking for it.
Yeah.
And so how do you maximize their input into you? Well, one of the ways you maximize it is not wasting it on frivolous things that you could have learned on your own or researched on your own.
Yeah. So that's smart. Yeah. It's funny. And what I always say is, when somebody says either A, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Anybody can afford a cup of coffee, and the time is super valuable. But even people come out of the gate, they're like, oh, I want to take you to Shanahan's or Del Fresco's or whatever. And it's like, no offense, I can afford a good steak.
Right.
So like, you're right. How do you become valuable to that other person? And then we can pour value into you as well. It's got to be reciprocal.
Yep. So from a team perspective, because I run a team, one of the things, like, a lot of people are like, well, can I sit down? And they ask this question, can I pick your brain? And I had somebody very early on tell me that's a terrible thing to ask, because all you're really saying is, I just want to take from you. Right. Yeah. And I know that a lot of people aren't meaning to say that, but I would just recommend to your audience, I would not approach a mentor with that. Like, I'd like to pick your brain. I just think it sets kind of a tone that you don't want to set. So I wouldn't ask to pick their brain. And then, like, what I've done is I've created, like, information on how to run a team. And I'm like, before you and I sit down and have a conversation about it, before I could help you, take a look at this and make sure that you've implemented these things, that they make sense for you.
Yeah.
If they don't, like basically we would sit down and I would have this conversation with you. Yeah. And instead of me sitting down and spending an hour and a half and you're only going to remember 5% of it, let me just send this to you. Take a look at it and let's see what you're willing to implement and how that looks. That's why I wrote a book with my father-in-law on real estate, because I was sitting down with clients. I was having the same conversation.
Yeah.
And like, instead of me doing that here, read a 94-page book. And if you read through this, then I know you're vested.
True.
And I'm totally interested in sitting down with you. It also gives us a common lexicon, right? So like they understand what cash flow is. They understand what ROI is, like all that. But there's no reason for me to sit down with them and spend an hour and a half going over that if they could read that on their own and get that. So anyway, a couple ideas.
That's huge. Well, and let's talk a little bit about the impact team. That's one of the teams that you run. Tell us a little bit about the structure of the team, and then we'll get into the investment side here in a second.
Yeah. So, quite honestly, I don't know how to make friends very well.
Yeah.
And so that was really my strategy to start off with it, the impact team, I did not create it. My father-in-law did. So it was my father-in-law, myself, my wife, and my best friend, who was an airline pilot. And so we started doing real estate together at the same time.
Yep.
And so we did not start the impact team with the idea of creating this team. We really just we liked working together. We liked being together. And that was really what the impact team turned into, is like a group of people that like working together and being around each other, and just that vibe. Like real estate, and I don't even know this from experience, but real estate, I guess, can be really lonely.
Yep.
I don't know that because I've always done it with my favorite people.
Yeah.
So that's really what it kind of turned into, is this group of people. So we're not looking to create a huge brand, a huge group of, there's 47 of us.
Okay.
We were number one in Denver Metro last year, according to DMAR.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number one large team. And it's really like a group of people that like to be together more, I would say, than anything. Yeah. We like to kind of push each other, have a good time. We used to, because most of us were new, it used to be pretty like basic stuff, but now it's more of a mastermind of people. So I don't know, we've said no to maybe 350 or so, and not because they're not good people, but really we're looking for a very specific fit.
Yes.
And if it's the right fit, I use the example, one lady that joined our team about 4 months after-ish, I think, about 4 months, she came down with cancer, and her husband, not leukemia, lupus.
Okay.
And it was tough for them, right? They had just moved here. They had no network, but she was amazing. Her husband was amazing. Their kids were amazing. So like we moved them, help move them. And like doing things like that is easy to do when you've got a lot of good people like pulling the cart, kind of like taxes, right? If you've got a lot of people paying it, you can take care of a few people sitting in the cart. Yep. But if you have very few people pulling the cart and a lot of people sitting in it, it doesn't work. So our model is like everybody is coming from contribution, and you're there to pull the cart. Yeah. And every once in a while, it's going to be your turn to sit in the cart.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy.
Don't feel bad about sitting in it. Like, we're here to take care of you. So.
Yeah, everybody needs help once in a while.
Yep.
No,
yeah.
That's awesome.
So
let's talk about your investment experience. I know it was about 2011 or so when you started doing investing. Maybe give our audience a snapshot of kind of what you've done and what styles of investing that you've jumped into.
Yeah, I started, I think, probably how a lot of your audiences probably started, like buying a first investment property, right? So I recommend to most people, unless you're living with your parents, you probably want to buy your first property first for you. Yep. So you're not paying rent. Building equity is probably the way almost everybody wants to start out. So buy your first property, which I did. And then I bought my first investment property with some buddies because at the time I didn't have enough money to buy my first property really. So a couple of buddies and I, we pooled money together and we bought a property. Actually, my first investment property was after my wife and I got broken into. Somebody came after us.
Oh, wow.
3:00 in the morning.
Crazy.
I knocked him down the stairwell with a 25-pound dumbbell. He ended up in the hospital. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2 days later, we were in Uganda doing a service trip that we had already had planned. And while we were there, my wife was like, I don't know if I want to be in the house alone while you're gone, because I was still working at doing some stuff, working, and was away. She's like, what if we bought this mansion and then we had a bunch of friends buy it with us and we all live in it for a while?
Cool.
And I'm all, are you serious? Right?
Your wife threw that out
This
there.
is my wife's
That's
idea.
impressive.
My wife comes up with all the good ideas anyway. If you know me, you know that's true. If you know us.
Nice.
So that's what we did. So a group of guys, my closest business partner, that's how he and I became really good friends, as we lived in the house together. So he actually got married and then his wife lived there for a little while. So eventually, after the 2 years, we knew we needed to live it in for 2 of 5. Yep. So after the 2 years, we all moved out of the house and kept it and rented it out for a while and then sold it. So that was my first real investment property, but that's kind of a weird one.
Yeah.
But after doing that, bought my first, I bought a duplex with some of those same guys that we bought that first house with.
Okay.
Nice. And so I learned a good lesson though. So if you're on here and you don't know this, from a lending perspective, it's important. So when we bought that big house, we put it on all of our credit. And then the banks look at it. I figured, hey, there was 4 of us that bought it. They would divide our debt to income ratio a fourth of the house, but that is not true. They look at that entire house was sitting on each of our credit, the total. So it really limited our ability to buy after that. So my advice to you, to your listeners rather, is like, make sure you know how to do that. Have somebody that helps you, because if you have good partners, you can put 1 property per on each of you and buy much more than buying 1 property and all of you being on the loan.
If you could have gone back, would you have put it into an LLC and then everybody owns a piece of the LLC?
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of ways, depending on what your structure is and what people's debt to income is and all that type of stuff. There's different ways to structure that.
Yeah.
So it's important that you have a lender that knows what they're doing to help you do it.
Nice.
Because it makes a big difference. It really slowed us down.
Especially if it was a nice big property, which it sounds like it was, right? Yeah. It's not just like a $200,000.
Yeah, it was $750,000. And at the time I was making about $150 a year.
Yeah.
So that was a huge debt sitting on my books. And I'm like, wait a second, it's divided by 4. There's 4 of us that own it. And the bank's like, yep, that's not how we look at it.
Yeah. No, that's right. You live and you learn.
Yeah.
100%.
So
talk to us. I know you've done some flips too. Talk to us about some of the flips that you've done and if you've gravitated towards liking one style versus the other in your fix and flip experience.
Yeah. So, I guess there's 2 ways to answer. Maybe like what I've done is mostly like single family, small, like, up to 7plex. That's about as big as I've flipped. So, and some of the flips I've bought and held for a little bit. Other ones I've bought and sold immediately. What I like to do is I like to look at the numbers, and it's like, hey, if it doesn't sell for a certain number, I will hold on to this and rent it until I can see the numbers that I want, because sometimes holding is a great strategy. Hold it for a year or 2, because then your taxes are different and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
So I recommend like taking a look at it. And if you can buy it and hold it for a little bit, that's nice to know, at least for the way my brain works. Like the back of my brain is like, hey, if I needed to rent this out and kind of a down market or something happened, it's nice to know that I can do that and cash flow it. But mostly, normal single families and duplexes, some triplexes. I find them, like a lot of people are like, I'm only buying off market. And I think that can slow you down a lot because there are some good on market properties. If you're partnering with like someone like you guys, partnering with the right folks that can find good on market properties as well. So, and that I guess would be one of my biggest, this is what I tell all my investors. If I was only waiting for the grand slam, I've bought and sold like in the thousands of properties now.
Right.
I've only fixed and flipped like about 25. That's not a big part of what I do. But what I've said is if I was looking only for grand slams, I probably would have 2.
Right.
Right. But I've done hundreds of deals for myself, multifamily, single family, all that stuff when you mix it up. And I've had lots of triples, lots of doubles. And like I said, the grand slams I had, only 1 out of all of them would I have ever even had. It's just like, I didn't even realize when I bought it, that's what it was. And that's just what it turned out to be.
Yes.
So what I say is like, understand what your numbers are, what you want them to look like. What are the margins you're really going for? And then like, just be reasonable and go after that and execute it. And then you're going to have some that are going to be a lot better than you think. And then you just feel really good, right? Count your blessings. But your success, you'll have so much more success over time if you're buying and doing this multiple times instead of 1 every 5 years. Like, it's just hard to get good.
Yeah. It almost goes back to that Malcolm Gladwell theory of that 10,000 hours.
Yes, sir.
How can you get 10,000 hours if you're waiting for the perfect scenario?
Yeah.
And to your point, like if we think about where the market went, the market in 2021 and 2022, we went in and we did all of our deals and we just pro formed them as doubles for using a baseball analogy, but they all turned into home runs and that was great. And we would have never had that opportunity. Like, don't go in and make it, like a bunt barely getting on first base.
Right.
But those doubles turn into home runs. And yes, every once in a while you kind of get your ass handed to you and it goes the other way.
Yep.
And we lose money. But if you don't take a swing at the plate, you're never going to get that experience.
Well, yeah. And the ones that do go the other way, where you get it handed to you, like you said, like if you're only doing one every once in a while, you don't even probably understand why. Right. But when you're doing this consistently and you're good at it and you become knowledgeable and you're working with knowledgeable people, it's like, that went sideways and we understand why it did. And we know how to probably not have that happen again. You just become so much more knowledgeable, but you're doing a lot of deals. You start to get some cushion there too, right? For the one that goes sideways. So
That helps.
I mean, yeah, well, I have one like very recently that went sideways. We bought it and it had been stripped down to the studs and the numbers were incredible. We were like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But there had been a stop work put on it. We're like, no problem.
Yeah.
We looked, permits had been pulled and all that stuff. We're like, awesome. It was a triplex. So we went in there. I'm going to make a long story short, 2.5 years. And we had to turn the triplex into a duplex.
Oh yeah.
It was a very, very painful process. Right.
Yeah.
But the big lesson there is don't just look that permits have been pulled, understand what happened with the stop work and where the permits are. Yeah. So they had pulled the permits, they had expired and we're like, oh, cool. Right. They had stopped work. They'd run out of funds. The permits had expired. Well, they'd expired for a specific reason. And that was the city had put them on permanent hold.
And that you're right, that happens. And I think that's the other thing is we see deals that come across our desk sometimes where it's like, oh, this is a new build opportunity and here's the plans and it's all ready to go. There's probably a reason somebody is running for the hills that the quote unquote plans are ready to go. Like not everybody just magically runs out of money at the same time. You're right. There's definitely some shadiness potentially going on behind the scenes.
We had basically that was a multiple grand slam that turned into a double maybe.
Right. 2 years later. Yeah.
So,
but that's okay. But you live and you learn. And
yes,
I think that's
absolutely.
sort of business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So. I want to learn a little bit about you are a very successful, highly producing real estate agent and professional. Our audience definitely is kind of wears two hats sometimes. Sometimes they're the investor themselves. Sometimes they're an agent. Sometimes they are both. What would you give advice to our audience for how to interview and how to find the right agent to work with you and work on your behalf? I loved your idea of, hey, it's not all off market. It can be on market opportunities, whether it's working with you or somebody on your team. What makes you a good agent to work with investors? Yeah,
well, and I'll use like what I use for my own criteria because I buy in other states.
Yes.
And I help clients buy in other states, right? So I've syndicated some deals and stuff like that, or even somebody's moving out of state and they're going somewhere. So what I do is I pick up the phone and I call based off of whatever search I've done. Like maybe I know a brokerage that's in a specific area or whatever. But if it's, let's just say that I have no idea like where in Maine, I don't know anyone in Maine. This happened to me last year. So what I do is I pick up the phone and I call multiple agents in the areas around where either I or my clients are looking. And the first thing I do is tell me a little bit about your investment portfolio. That's my first question because I don't want to be helped by an agent that doesn't buy and sell investment real estate. Because to me, my perspective is if you're in this industry for any amount of time, you should be seeing good deals and you should be doing something related to them. So
that's really good insight. You know, it's funny. We've changed over and we're building a team. The folks that have their licenses under Elevation are now under EXP. So we're building kind of that classical team. And we were talking to somebody from a recruitment standpoint, and it's a person that has a lot of experience. I mean, they've been doing this for a long, long time. And that was actually my question, which is, okay, you want to lean in towards real estate investing. Tell me about your portfolio. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to be a person owns 800 properties or whatever. But if you haven't stumbled across deals, it's a weird scenario. And to me, it's pretty short-sighted. I think what you've done and a lot of people on your team is use real estate as a way to generate long-term wealth. Doesn't have to be you're doing X number of deals per year, but I'm always blown away at people that it's like a financial advisor that doesn't have their money in the market. Like, would you let that person manage your money?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 100%. There's not a whole lot for me to add there. They need the experience to be able to help you. Yeah. They just do. And it, like you said, they don't have to own 400 properties. Yeah. Like, I don't really care how much they own. Tell me about how many you've bought and sold and why have you done it? And what's that experience been like? And I mean, one guy is like, I don't have anything right now. I'm like, okay, I'm figuring like I'm about to hang up, move on to the next phone call. And he's like, I've sold off all of my assets because of the divorce. I'm like, oh, well, tell me about that. Right. And he told me, he had owned 9 or 10 properties and through a divorce, he was liquidating them and stuff like that. And it was just like, it was an interesting conversation. Then he actually ended up being the one we hired.
Nice.
So it was like, again, it didn't matter to me what his portfolio value was or anything like that. Yep. Like, tell me, like, what do you know about this market and how to help me find a good investment here?
Yeah. So, well, let's maybe dive a little deeper on that. Tell me what got you excited about investing in other markets out of state versus just keeping everything in the backyard of the Metro Denver area. Why'd you go out of state?
Stupidity.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. Honesty. I love that. Yeah. There we go.
So here's what I've found. I've learned, there's some bumps and bruises and gray hair. It sounds so attractive often to invest in other places because when you're investing, you find that it becomes challenging, right? You see all the challenges here and this idea of going somewhere else, it's kind of like the grass is greener. So like, our experience is Detroit. We went and bought in Detroit. One of the reasons we did is what I talked about earlier is we had maxed out a lot of our lending ability because we had all bought that one property together, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So the banks were starting to tell us like, you can't, like, it was getting difficult. And at that time, I did not know how to raise capital.
Sure.
Like I raise capital now quite often, but I didn't know how to do it then. And so we were like, well, where can we buy cheap where we think there's going to be good appreciation? And so one of the places that we went was to Detroit. And man, that was challenging. I was able to buy properties at $25,000 and then, put 25 into them. But here's what I would tell an audience. You want to be buying in a place, one, that you're probably going to go to semi-regularly, because no matter how great of a crew you have, like, you need attorneys, you need contractors, you need property managers, all those things. And if they go dark on you or they're not doing a good job, you're going to have to go there. Yeah. Right. So either you need to have somebody that you know and trust, like a best friend or, your father-in-law or whatever it is that lives there that can do this for you. But you're going to have a really hard time putting together a great team remotely and never going there. Yeah. So I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that they're like, oh, I've got this amazing deal in Virginia or this incredible thing in, Pennsylvania or wherever it is, or Washington State. And then I talk to them a year later and like, oh, it went super sideways. Yeah. Right? And it's because they don't have boots on the ground. So
that's super important.
Yeah. So,
well, that actually gets into an area where I always like to ask best and worst deals. So you told me about that one, but you also mentioned one in Oklahoma City. Let's talk about the worst, then I want to get to your best, but tell me about your deal in Oklahoma City.
So Oklahoma City,
south.
We did our due diligence. This was with people that so I don't manage properties. My wife and I bought a property management company. We flipped it, and then we completely got out of the property management space.
That's hard.
It's very time consuming, right? Yeah. I'll tell you, a good property manager is worth their weight in gold. Yes. And property management is a lot like an offensive lineman.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Love that analogy.
Like no one ever talks about them unless they're screwing up. Mm-hmm. Right. And so like even a good property manager, you're going to probably hear mostly the negative, but like we had a really good property manager here. And so they were doing investing out of state, multifamily. So good trust relationship. They're good people. So I think it was about 180 unit property that we bought, that we were part of the deal. And it wasn't buying it poorly. I mean, they bought it okay. Actually, the value almost doubled in the property. So I think we bought it like 38 a door and we sold it for 63 a door. So, I mean, you're thinking like, that's amazing, but the management of the property was terrible. Yes. The vacancy was terrible, issues with the property with plumbing and electrical, and it completely ate through everything. So literally like it was a 73% loss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if we can maybe ask one more question on that, we normally do multifamily with like A class, which is super nice, fancy downtown Denver stuff. B class, which is kind of workforce housing, but is nicely maintained. They're probably in their transition period of maybe buying something in the future. And then C class is definitely rundown stuff that needs a lot of love. What class was that?
It was like C+. Okay. So we were buying it, and the model was a 7-year model, fix and flip, get it operational, raise the cap rate, and then sell it. So again, we did from a perspective of the value, right? We renovated almost the whole thing in the process, but electrical, plumbing, and roofing, and then just mismanagement of the property. It's like lots of vacancy in the process and some issues with the city. Just at the end, it was just not a good deal. Yeah.
And what was the time that you held that from when you were in the deal versus when you guys ended up exiting?
I think we held it for 5.5.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good amount of time.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and when we sold it, we did the analysis and there was just no way to get more money out of that property.
Yeah. And at some time, you're right. It's like cut your losses. It sucks. Yes. We've done it before, but just cut your losses.
It feels terrible, but it's much better than holding out. Don't throw good money after bad. Yeah. Right. And so that's that. Like sometimes you have to look at it like this just was not a good deal and you got to move on.
Yeah. That's smart. Okay, now let's talk about one of your best deals. You had kind of a fun one where you did some subdivisions and there was an Airstream involved. Tell me about your good / most fun deal.
Yeah, so I would say that's so I was a late adopter into the Airbnb space. And here's my apology to my investors. Like, I'm sorry because I kept telling you, like, I don't understand how this is working or why this is working. Like, why would you buy an Airbnb? Who's renting out a place in Denver Metro to stay? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And I'll be honest, in a way, I still don't get it. I still don't get who is coming and staying at these places, but they are. I mean, all I know is they are because the numbers are there. So I've worked about 20, I think we've done 26, 27 of them. Okay. And you have to be very careful because like there's so many rules and regulations and you have to understand that those could be changed like at any point. And now you have this property you can't Airbnb. Yep. Like I know some people that happened up with like Horsetooth and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, so you have to demand a higher return for your Airbnb because of the risk. I mean, returns are all based off of risk profiles, right? I mean, that's why we have the returns that we do. A T-bill gets a lot less return than buying Apple stock in general. And that's because just the risk that is involved with it.
Sure.
And so this is the same, right? When you're buying an Airbnb, you have to realize, one, you're running a hotel.
Yep.
Right. It's not really a rental property. It's more of a hotel. And vacancy and changes in laws and stuff can really dramatically change your return or expected return on that property.
Yeah. I think that's super important. There's parts of the country too, where you're doing monstrously high price points and the pro formas look great on paper. But if that's your only exit strategy, you're right. You're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be, I know some people that have gotten very, very upside down. Right. And I know other people have done incredibly well. So the property that we were talking about was so fun. I own quite a few investment properties and stuff like that. And I have a hard time with assets that are just sitting around doing nothing, making no money for me. Yep. It just seems like bad stewardship. And so, bought this Airstream for my family and we're like, this is so fun. But like anything like that, any camper, they sit dormant most of the time. Yeah. And so for me, I had a really hard time buying this, $100,000 thing that's then it's like a home that is not being used except for 3 or 4 times a year and then paying to have it stored. Yeah. Like mentally for me, I could not get my brain around that. So I was looking for a place that I could park it and rent it out. So I was looking for a very specific type of property. So I found something over by Regis. It was on an old apple orchard. So it was about 3/4 of an acre lot with an old house that really probably needs to be torn down. Yeah. But it's just very cool. So we put the Airstream, subdivided the lot, put the Airstream on it. So we rent the house out and we rent the Airstream out. Okay. And it's just really fun. And then when we go out and we, go to Burning Man or go camping with my kids or whatever it is, we just mark it off. It's not rentable, and we go and pull it out of there and go camping for a few days and come back and hook it back up.
Nice. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So and the returns have been really good. About 30, I think pretty close to about 40% return on that investment.
Yeah. No, that's a great ROI.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, and the utility of getting to use it is really cool.
Yeah.
So.
That's huge to be able to check that personal benefit box, almost like a second home. I mean, it essentially is a second home on wheels for you.
Yeah. It's like a little, a vacation home that you roll around in.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
It's fun.
Well, and I know our audience, everybody's always nervous, positively and negatively about where the market's going. Mm-hmm. Obviously, nobody has a crystal ball, but you've got a ton of experience. You've seen a lot of different markets. Where do you see things kind of winding up as we are almost done with 23, but kind of looking into 2024 from the investment perspective as far as, real estate's concerned? What do you think?
I'd say pretty flat, right? I mean, we've seen 10, 12, 15, 18% appreciation. I don't think we're going to see that probably for a while. And we had really low interest rates, like artificially low. So if you're sitting out there and you're waiting for 2.5 or 3%, you're probably never going to see that in your lifetime. That was so artificially low. But 5.5% probably is coming back at some point, but slower than I think maybe 2 years or something. I don't think it's coming in 2 months. So, and it might go higher. So what I would say is your Denver Metro, we'll just talk about Denver Metro. I have a very hard time talking nationally, but that doesn't help people mostly anyway. So I'd say if you're Denver Metro, I would say you're looking at between 2 and 4% appreciation, which is healthy, which is good, right? Normal. And if you're leaving your money on the sideline, you're losing money, right? Because you will not catch up, assuming you're buying a $450,000 or $500,000 place and it's appreciating it between 2 and 4%. Waiting doesn't help you. Yeah. I would say if your numbers work right now, if you pencil it out and the numbers work, I would do it sooner than later, because as interest rates come down, you're going to have price pressure, right? And so prices are going to go up and it will be worse for you, not better for you. Yeah. That's my assessment.
No, I think that's totally smart. Any type of pocket of opportunity that you see coming down the pipeline next year, whether it's being able to do a certain price point on flips or doing the Airbnbs or maybe commercial or anything that stuck out to you like, hey, this is probably going to be good next year?
I think there's going to be quite a few people that are going to be falling out of the Airbnb space because there's 2 things that have happened, right? Interest rates have gone up. And taxes have gone, I guess 3 things. Interest rates have gone up, taxes have gone up, and insurance has gone up.
True.
Insurance and taxes are dramatic. I mean, insurance maybe even 40%, right, going up. And so a lot of people have penciled their numbers off of, 2020, 2021, and just their numbers are going to be so different. Yeah. Denver's was in the top 10 in the nation, and not in a good way, of price per night. decrease for Airbnb.
Right.
So I think you're going to see some good opportunity potentially in the Airbnb space. And a lot of these are going to probably have gotten kind of beat up over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
so you're going to be able to go in there, fix them up a little bit and convert them back into a better rental, Airbnb space or rental. So I would keep my eye on that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's interesting.
And I guess there's a lot of people that are falling out of the flip space.
True.
Right. They had these contractors that they can't pay anymore. Their margins are smaller. So I think you're going to see people falling out of that space, and it's going to create opportunity for people that want to get in, and they're not going to be looking for the same high margins. They're probably hopefully going to be smarter in the way that they do things. So I think you're going to see this opportunity in that space open up as well.
Yeah, no, I love it. And that's a chance for us that are still staying the course, and still being nimble in your business model to just pick up market share.
Yep.
It's just kind of that classic rolling of the economy. Stuff's going to be good sometimes and going to be super challenging. And, just don't just fold and run home. It's like find ways to be nimble and make more
for
money.
the people where they say when the tide goes out, you figure out who's not wearing pants.
Yeah.
So for your listeners, if you're newer in this space, like partnering with someone like you that has been through it, that's why my father-in-law, he went through the 2008 financial crisis. Yes. So I tell people I got in 2011. So I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I really haven't proven it. I have not been through a downturn yet. Yeah. Right. It's people that are invested, for 3 years and they're talking about their returns. I'm like, that's hard to say you're good at what you do. Talk to me after you've done it for 10, right? And you've gone through some sort of downturn. So my father-in-law just really, really good advice. During the downturn, he had good margins going in. He didn't overextend himself. And he was like, look, my properties, I'm still cash flowing them. The value, he had done quite a bit of investing in Phoenix, and he's like, the value has fallen, but I'm cash flowing these things. Yeah. I'm not overextended. So he just waited through the downturn and he was fine. And then he knew what to look for during the downturn. And then he picked up a lot of stuff near and at the bottom.
Yes.
Right. And so there's a way to make money at almost any time. But I would say if you're newer to this podcast, find someone that, like Derek, his team that have done this, that know what to do and that are staying the course, that are going to be around in 5 years, that aren't going out of business in 30 days.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's some of the challenge for some people is they get pissed because we tell them no, meaning this is not a good deal. Let's just wait and let's write more offers. Let's meet more people. Let's deliver more value. We'll get a good deal, but it's just not charge in. Yeah.
You got to be patient. You have to, right? The numbers have to work when you start. Like I say, it's treat a rental property or investment property like a race bike, a track bike. Don't fall in love with it, right? You don't fall in love with your track bike because that thing's going to get laid down at some point, right? It's going to get messed up. Same thing. Don't fall in love with an investment property. You fall in love with the numbers and the margins you're looking for. And then when it works out, you find the right ones and you go for it. But that's why it's nice not to have this huge contractor base and stuff like that, because it's, you got to feed those folks. So people that overextending themselves in that space, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, no, you're smart about that. I want to talk a little bit about this audience is definitely real estate investment focused, real estate agent focused, but I'm always trying to give insights from our guests of how to work on the business versus in the business. And even if you're a solopreneur or a one man or woman show out there doing your thing, is there something that you do, whether it's with your independent investing or even with the impact team, that you work on the business maybe strategically versus just in the business, meaning you're getting up, you got 7 meetings this day, you're super busy. What do you do to work on the business?
Well, my wife has done an amazing job of getting me to leave the bit, because my personality, I could work all day, every day.
Yeah, me too.
I like it. Yeah. And so, that's I don't do the drugs and the drinking and stuff like that. My drug, if you will, is kind of work in a way. And right. And it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of value sometimes, but it's also can be bad for our health and our mental, and the ones that we love and stuff like that. So she does a great job of saying we are getting away. Whether that's travel or whether that's going out for evenings or whatever it is. So we get away, and that's she always points out, your best ideas come up when we get away from the business.
Nice.
So for me, that's the, it's we go and we'll stay at a hotel, we'll go to Vegas for 2 nights or something like that. And I'll be taking a shower, and then this thing pops into my head, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an opportunity. I write it down, I get back, I get with my people, and then we start talking about stuff. So that's the way I would say, the process for me is getting out of it. Really getting out of it. Because if I'm in it, I just work on the stuff. I'm making the phone calls, I'm meeting the people, because I like doing that. I like the coffees and I like the dinners and all that type of stuff. So
no, that's good. Well, and actually you have a cool kind of ritual or practice of what you do, or maybe I should say what you don't do on Wednesdays. Give our audience a sense of your Wednesday. Cause I don't hear a lot of people that do this. And I really, really applaud you for staying strong. And you've been doing this ever since I've known you. So what do you do on Wednesdays?
Yeah. So Wednesday is my meeting with the Queen. So I meet with the Queen every Wednesday. The Queen is my wife.
Nice.
I call her my wife and girlfriend. Like it depends on the day and what we're doing.
There you go.
But yeah, so every Wednesday, and again, this came from, like I said, most good ideas in my family come from my wife, because I was very focused on working. It was fun. I didn't come from affluence. And for me, that was like almost like it helped me not be afraid is to be working and generating income. Like, you know, if you start digging deep into like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And so she was like, and my wife is a quality timer. If you've ever heard of the 5 love languages, are kind of like 5 ways that we give love and receive love. And I like that. I think it's a good lattice work to kind of understand how we operate. And so she's quality time. I'm not at all. And so quality time meaning like not just being around each other, but like actually investing and being present. Like for me, being in the same room is cool. Like if I'm working on my laptop and she's sitting reading a book or something, like I feel like that's, hey, we're connecting, and that's not for her. So she came up with the ideas on Wednesday, especially as like a real estate agent. A lot of your weekends can be taken up, you know, showing homes and looking at investment opportunities and stuff like that. So Wednesday made a lot of sense, and she came from a real estate family, so she gets it. She's like, Wednesday, I want you to take off of work. Like you're not working.
Love it.
And we're going to do something, and you're going to plan some of it sometimes, and I'm going to plan some of it sometimes. What do you think about that? And so now, I mean, we've been doing it for years. I'd have to think back when we started, but I would say we were just laughing about this a couple of days ago. Like that, I would say is one of the keys to our happiness, to a very good, fun marriage. And it used to be hard for me to do it.
Yeah.
Like, right. It was hard for me to unplug. Now it's like, I really look forward to it.
That's awesome.
Like I love, so like we did, our last one was, we did a Aperol crawl is what we called it. So not even intentionally, we were just trying to find lunch on a Wednesday and a couple places that we wanted to go. Like we wanted to sit on a patio. The sun wasn't the right place or whatever. So we ended up like just stopping and grabbing an Aperol spritz. And then we were like, oh, let's go to another place. And it just turned into Aperol spritzes for an afternoon. It was so fun.
You're speaking my language. That was one of the things that caught us. So my wife and I did our 15-year anniversary, and this is both good and bad, that it was celebrating 15, but it was on year 17. So it took us, an extra 2 years to really get this thing dialed and get it done, and went over to Italy. And there's something about the Italian lifestyle where I'm like, how can these people just kick it in the middle of the day and drink these Aperol spritzes? They're these weird looking orange drinks. And then you have one, and then you realize the lifestyle, and you're like, this is awesome. You're speaking my language, and it's like a life change. And I'm like, I'm not doing it enough, but I love your Aperol spritz crawl.
Well, and we tried like many years ago when we first went over to Italy, the same thing. And like you're sitting out in a piazza or whatever, and everybody has these weird orange drinks, and we're like, oh, we want one of those, and we had it, and we did not like it at all.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste.
It's an acquired, and so like every time we go back to Europe or whatever, we came. So finally, it was like 2 years ago. I mean, so we're like 10 years plus into this wanting to drink an Aperol, and finally we did it at a party because they had like 3 drinks, and we were like, oh, let's try it again. We haven't tried it in a while. And we were both like, oh, so it's an acquired taste, but then once you get it, it's fun. So
that's awesome.
So I recommend to the audience, try an Aperol crawl sometime.
There you go. There you go. Okay. I want to be sensitive to your time. I've got 2 more things as we wind down. One is, what's one thing you want to leave the audience with? We've covered so much ground. You've got such diverse experience, and I think just a great outlook on life and that life balance, or that work balance harmony. What's something you want to leave the audience with that we haven't talked about yet?
So I think we talked a little bit about working with someone that knows what they're doing. If you're new, like a mentor / like what your team does, that is key. It will cover a multitude of sins, and your rate of learning will be so much faster, and you're not learning lessons, like you're not experiencing them yourselves, making mistakes that you don't need to make if you just work with someone that knows what they're doing. So I run into that all the time. So someone with a proven track record, act like what we said, ask them, like, what have you done? Right? If they sit down with you and they ask you what you've done, you can show them a portfolio of a lot of success. And that's what you need. Money is so important. And I don't mean money necessarily that you have it, but how to get it. Like you need access to funds. So I do a lot from a lending perspective. I'm one of the rare ones that has my real estate and my lending license. If you're an agent out there, I work with agents on getting licensed so that you can legally get paid for your loans and helping your clients. So it's called Dual. Reach out to me if you're interested in that. So that's the money part is very important, and knowing how to navigate that. Like we talked about earlier, like I did it wrong at the beginning and it really slowed down my investment portfolio. And I didn't need to do it wrong if I just had somebody that knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing.
Yeah. Those are two great takeaways. Well, Dan Fortune, my friend, thank you for being a guest on Raising the Flipping Bar. So, fantastic to have you here, and we'll catch you on the flip side.